The skybox of Starfield is probably one of the most immersive things that they did do in this game. And it's done, of all the things in the game, it's probably one of the most polished aspects of the game, even though it does have some flaws and it's not completely free from criticism. It was done in a very good aspect and it draws everyone into the game very well. Oh, what is this? Simulation got a rare skybox of an eclipse when landing on the moon. Geez, when they make it possible to land and take off from a planet before, during, or after seeing the so-called eclipse, it won't be a simulation. Until then, it's just a skybox animation. That's interesting. So I think we're going to spend this video kind of exploring what exactly is the skybox and what kind of misconceptions there are out there about the skybox, as the commenter probably got every aspect of his comment incorrect. I think the only thing he does have correct is that it is in fact a skybox. Maybe it's a skybox. There definitely was tons of changes to this skybox to make it perform in the way that it does, and I don't know if we would want to even consider it a skybox. There are some elements of it that are familiar to traditional skyboxes, but there are some elements that are brand new and completely different. So we're going to go ahead and take a moment to kind of explore this whole entire concept of what the skybox is, how it works, and why it is a simulation opposed to an animation. I think they're two very different things, and I think that the commenter might be thinking that there's a lot of random chance in these events that occur in the skies above him, when in fact the skybox behaves more like a clock than a set of dice. But we're going to go ahead and take a deep dive into it, and the first thing we're going to do is go to Archimedes, and we're going to talk about the first layer of the skybox, and that's going to be the atmosphere and weather. So the first layer of the skybox we're going to talk about is the weather and the atmosphere. So this is kind of two parts. One, the weather. This is randomly generated. So it's not simulated. We don't see simulated storm systems rolling around the planets or anything. This is just a random generation, and in fact, the player can reset it rather easily through fast travel, either to your ship or to a different location. We'll typically go ahead and reset it. The second aspect we should probably talk about is the atmosphere. Now, this isn't always present on every planet/moon, but ones where it is there. The atmosphere during the day refracts light from the host star, causing it to be illuminated and the stars to not be visible. But at night, this effect does not occur, and we're able to see stars outside of the current system, as well as planets and moons become more visible than they already are. But this brings us to kind of the last layer. We'll talk about the in-between layer most of all, but the last layer is the stars themselves. So this is basically also like a stagnant animation. The stars are not simulated. They're kind of a sphere that we exist in that blankets the whole entire system, with tiny little points in it of light, and as we rotate around, we get to see all the different stars in the galactic plane, etc., etc. It's a very good artistic rendition. It does not need to be more than this, because the movements of the stars, to see them actually move in relationship to one another, would take years, like decades, if not centuries. So the way Bethesda did do it is perfectly fine, but we're going to go ahead and talk about Pluto for a bit. So now we find ourselves on Charon. This is the moon of Pluto, and we're looking at Pluto. So the moon of Pluto and Pluto itself is such an interesting planetary system within the system of Sol. This is a former planet. It's now a dwarf planet. But in real life, these two astral bodies are in fact tidally locked to each other. So what does that mean? As we drive across Pluto here, we can clearly see that this, well, we're driving across Charon here, and Pluto is up there in the sky. If we return to this exact same spot several hours later, which we will in a bit, Pluto is going to be in the exact same spot. And it's not going to move. So the gravitational forces between Pluto and Charon are so strong because their orbit is so close to one another that the gravitational friction causes both these objects to always face each other the same way. And in fact, they're orbiting around a point of empty space that is between them. So they're orbiting nothing. The center of mass is between Pluto and Charon itself. And this is done very well in the game. So this tidal locking is experienced both on Charon and Pluto. And let's go ahead and come back in a couple hours and see how Pluto looks. So here we are. We're back 12 local hours later. It is roughly 96 UTC hours later, several days, and we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at Pluto and see if its position has changed at all within the night sky. And as we can see, it's in the same spot. That is marvelous. So this is the tidally locked moon of Charon, which is tidally locked to Pluto, and gives us this lovely view of Pluto. But let's see how well Bethesda did with the texture of Pluto compared to the real thing. So we've actually sent probe, I believe that was in 2014, it's swung by Pluto, the New Horizons probe, and it took some lovely photos of the surface of Pluto that we can go ahead and kind of compare to the real thing. So there is the real image of Pluto from the New Horizons space probe, and you know what, it does look surprisingly close to the real thing. So there's that. I think they did the texture pretty well. They had some good attention to real science when they did do it. And also, if you have not realized it yet, the shadow and sunny side of Pluto have actually swapped now that I waited 12 hours, which is exactly how it should behave in the real world. But let's go ahead and confirm that we can get the same behavior out of Charon from the planet Pluto and make sure that, you know, both Pluto is tidally locked. It's supposed to be. So we're here on Pluto with our camera looking at Charon, and we're going to kind of look for the same behavior. You can kind of see it high up there in the sky. Looks very much like the moon. This we also did get some lovely images from the New Horizons spacecraft. Now, the Charon is a very small moon, but Pluto also is a very small planet. So both have extremely low gravity in real life, and I would highly suspect on either Charon or Pluto, using those vertical boosters might completely take you out of orbit, just with how high they can get you in normal gravity, opposed to this gravity, which is just a fraction of Earth's. But let's go ahead and take a look at Charon 12 hours later local time, and I believe it's 64 UTC hours later. As we can see, it's in a very similar part of the sky, just above the horizon yet again. And also the lighted half has switched between the bottom and the top, which is as expected with, half a day passing. So this too is very much behaving in the same manner as before, where we have Pluto being tidally locked to Charon and Charon being tidally locked to Pluto. So this is one of the aspects that I really like about Starfield, is that it is true to the science that we knew or do know at the time. So there's a lot of aspects that are included in this game, really fine details I don't think people would expect to find to be true, that actually are true. Like, I would not expect this level of detail between Pluto and its moon Charon. But let's take a look at the texture as well and see how well it matches the texture of Charon. As we can see with the image provided by the New Horizons space probe, we do have a very similar texture. I would say it is noticeable, the difference between the New Horizons image, with the reddish hue on top being missing from the texture provided in the base game, but you know what, they did pretty good of a job of getting that to kind of match up and look like the moon Charon, and they did a very stellar job in the behavior of these two objects and how it's uniquely tidally locked to each other. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at some eclipses and kind of explain how these do happen and how they're really not random, they're very much simulated. So here we are. I do not know where exactly this planet is, but we're on a moon observing a gas giant. What can we see? We can see the seasons of the rings. This is where different sides of the rings are presented to us. So right now we're seeing the one half be presented to us, and then these phases of the planet itself as the sun shrinks. So this is an interesting observation that we can point out, is the sun, which is well below the horizon line at this point, its effect is visible on the planet that we can witness. So this is kind of what is meant by it's a simulation and not an animation. The position of that star is being calculated to kind of point where that light source would be coming from and simulate that on the planet, giving us the phases of the planet. I also go ahead and point out in the background, we can see these background stars, but what you can see, and I'd like to point out most of all, is the galactic plane. Now that's the plane where the stars are the densest and the brightest. Typically, when you are observing any of these in game, stars are going to be lined up with the galactic plane, and that's fairly true of our galaxy itself. Most stars are within the line of the galactic plane itself. As you know, we do exist in a spiral galaxy, and our galaxy is relatively flat. It forms in a plane like that. So one of the things I like to do when I am observing these is kind of position the planet itself by traveling around whatever moon I'm on until I get it where the planet is right above the horizon line, and I can tell the stars are coming up from the horizon. I know that that sun will arise from that direction, and I can know when the eclipse is going to happen. It's going to be a short time after sunrise, which is local time. It's going to be 6 in the morning, with sunset being 6 p.m. This is kind of how this time system works. It's based off the day and night cycle locally, and not hours. So time is relative in a sense to the planets itself. But just observing the eclipse here, we can see wonderful lighting effects as the star does transit the rings. It causes the light to flicker up and down, and then it does eventually pass in front of the planet, becoming completely blacked out. I will note that there is a defect in the lighting of the ground. The ground still remains illuminated, and that defect is highlighted much more in planets that have habitable systems. But let's go observe some different styles of eclipses, and this is going to kind of highlight how the system itself is simulated to create this skybox. So the system, the solar system, whatever solar system you're in, is completely simulated. The star's position is simulated, as well as any planets nearby, moons, etc. within that system, and they're all visible within the sky at night, and their positions are tracked because they'll cast shadows even when they're not on screen. So we're going to witness a moon that is not visible to us go ahead and cast a shadow on this gas giant in Tau Ceti. So this is Tau Ceti, I believe this is Tau Ceti 8b, and I think we are going to be seeing the shadow from Tau Ceti 8c be cast on this gas giant here. I do go ahead and try to look around as best as possible rather quickly to see if I can catch the moon somewhere in view, but I was unable to locate the moon, meaning it is likely actually behind us and not visible. It's under the horizon line, and it's coming from Tau Ceti's 8c, and we're on Tau Ceti 8b, and it's behind us as it's casting the shadow on the planet. But we'll get here, and it's going to be popping up in just a moment now, and we can watch and observe how it does indeed cast a shadow. And these things, they do occur in regular basis. Like all these orbits are simulated, and they occur at certain rates and certain times. They're all going to be different. Like Tau Ceti C is going to have a larger orbit and take more time to transit around the planet than Tau Ceti 8b, of course. But we are unable to see exactly where that moon is coming from. But that moon is definitely casting a shadow upon the planet itself, and that's kind of what is meant by the simulation. The simulation, it's simulating all the positions of the planets and the moons, the light source of the star itself, and casting shadows in various different directions, illuminating these planets and moons differently throughout the night sky, and it does the job very well. You will notice a lot of different things. You can see eclipses from planet side that are caused by other moons, etc., that are not even visible within the night sky. They're behind the moon you might be on, and this is a wonderful aspect to the game, and it's all calculated out. It all makes mathematical sense. It might not be 100% realistic with the orbits, as they're all very symmetrical orbits, but you know, we can see and observe a lot of different behaviors, like this planet here. So this is another planet, but it's got a rather large axis tilt, which is going to cause it so we don't actually, in fact, see an eclipse. As you can see, the galactic plane on this one is all the way out to the right-hand side of us, and that's where the star is going to be passing, and that's because not only is this planet on a large axis tilt, but the moon itself is also orbiting at a rather steep angle, so none of this stuff actually lines up for us, and we don't actually get an eclipse here, and we can kind of see and preemptively tell. I'm not going to sit around and wait for it to fail to connect with that eclipse. I have plenty of partial eclipses that I have captured before, and we don't need to go ahead and capture misses and other things like that. We're going to go ahead and go to a different planet and check out and see what we can find. Now here we're on Kodos. This is the moon of Aquila, and this is an extremely interesting moon. It is not tidally locked to Aquila, so we get to see Aquila kind of drift through the night sky itself as it progresses round and round. So what we mean by not tidally locked, so this moon is rotating in a way that it doesn't face the same side to Aquila all the time. And the same thing is true for Aquila as well. So if you happen to build, say, an outpost on Kodos, every once in a while you will get to get a nice view of Aquila. Basically, anywhere except for the poles, you should be able to visibly see Aquila at some point throughout its day. Eventually, it will have its moment where Aquila is overhead, casting that wonderful image. One thing I will note is that Aquila does sometimes eclipse its star. So its star also progresses through the sky, and it progresses at a faster rate than Aquila does and will eventually catch it and cause an eclipse. It's not that's very stunning on a planet with an atmosphere as opposed to a planet without an atmosphere, but very interesting indeed, and does provide probably one of the most unique skybox experiences in the game. But if you're looking for planets that are orbiting gas giants that are not tidally locked, where you would typically want to go is you would want to go to moons that are in far orbits from their gas giants. Why would you do this? And that's because Bethesda kind of paid attention to the science. What causes a moon to become gravitationally locked to its host planet? It's going to be a combination of its gravity and also how close of proximity it is to that host planet. So the combination of the gravity of the two planets and how close it is will cause gravitational friction to slow down its rotation until it eventually becomes tidally locked. But this is not a concern for moons that are farther away from their host planet or might be of a smaller size. So there's that to consider, and Bethesda did do a good job of that. So here we're on Vern 7E, I believe it is. This is not tidally locked, and basically every day you do get to witness the host planet swing through the sky, no matter where you're at, except for maybe the pole regions might not be visible, but it does do that. And I will say it is also possible to capture an eclipse on this moon here, as eventually the star will catch up with the planet in the sky itself above. Though I will say it is rather challenging to capture that eclipse, as you're going to basically have to chase it across the surface of the planet. But because everything is simulated, it is actually possible to go ahead and continue with different landing spots and capture that eclipse. I have done it in the past. I did not do it for this video because I don't think it's really spectacular video footage because of how much everything is moving. It can be rather difficult to capture that footage accurately. Last time I did do it, I ended up having to capture it over about 5 different landing sites with how fast both the planet and the star itself are moving. But to the original commoner's credit, there are aspects which are kind of traditional to a skybox animation. We do have the weather aspect, which is rather random, and also the background stars, which are rather stagnant, kind of being dragged across the sky itself. But as far as the objects of the system you're in, they are absolutely fully simulated with lighting effects and a lot of science incorporated, in fact. So that Bethesda did do a good job paying attention to the science of gas giants and moons and how they do orbit, how they do behave, with some being tidally, actually the vast majority of them being tidally locked, but very distant objects not being tidally locked. They do have some oddballs out there with some really eccentric, tilted orbits. Some aspects where I think we could criticize. I think there is definitely some criticism that we could provide with the lighting effect of the eclipses themselves, as they don't kind of blacken out the background lighting. So it leaves that. And as far as if you do observe them on like a planet with an atmosphere, the atmosphere will still stay illuminated during the time of the eclipse, which is kind of different than how they occur in real life. In real life, you see the sky black out, you can see the stars during the day. We don't see that within the game itself. So I think that's some aspects which they could probably put some improvement into the game. As far as things, I think that Bethesda could do as gravy to improve the skybox. Basically, I'm not upset that they are missing from the base game, but I think they could definitely add a lot to the base game. But if they could add a little bit of randomness to the simulation, in like the concept of maybe comets and meteorites, that would be a rather interesting aspect. I think that would be a rather interesting aspect to see. Maybe the occasional comet stream past your skybox, or have a meteorite come streaming into an atmosphere. So those are some aspects that I think they could do for improvement of the skybox. But as far as like considering this a skybox, I would say yes, it's definitely a skybox, but a mere skybox, no, this is a fully simulated night sky. Um, I do know some other games do this, like I believe No Man's Sky and Elite Dangerous have kind of simulated skyboxes, and there's that aspect of it. This is not exactly groundbreaking, but I think Bethesda did it in a very good way. I think the artistic form and how they did it, and the attention to like orbits, adding a lot of unique in different orbits and axis tilts, does make this a rather good and immersive skybox, and it kind of draws the player in, or at least it draws me in. So I made this response in regards to that comment to kind of just highlight how much of the skybox is in fact simulated, and that this isn't just, some animation that someone made in the studio and is just projecting in the night sky. So this is really truly a simulated system, and this kind of just highlights a point I've been seeing people make online as of late, and I've been thinking about for quite a while now, is there is quite a large bit of Starfield derangement syndrome, where people perceive negatives where none exists, and they will view every aspect of Starfield as bad or not good. And we're probably going to see a rather large uptick with the launch of Shattered Space coming up ahead. And I think people should probably be aware of this, and, provide a polite kickback and rebuttal. But, if you did find this video informative or enjoyable or interesting, go ahead and give me a like. I do appreciate it, and make sure you do enjoy the remainder of your night, and have a good weekend.